The morning mist drifts across a wide green valley in the northern mountains. Rivers cut through meadows of wildflowers and herds of spotted horses move like living clouds. This is Wallowa Valley, the heart of the Nez Perce people. For centuries, the Nimipu meaning the people lived here in balance with the land. The French called them Nez Perce, the pierced nose, but to themselves they were simply the people guardians of rivers and riders of wind. They were horse breeders, hunters, and fishers, never conquerors. Their laws were simple: take only what you need, give thanks to the spirits of stone and stream. In the early 1800s, strangers arrived, the Lewis and Clark expedition, cold, hungry, and lost. The Nez Perce shared food, fire, and friendship. It was a moment that could have written a different story for America, a story built on trust. Among the people stood a boy who listened more than he spoke. His name was Hinmatu Yalatket, later known as Chief Joseph. From his father, he learned one truth: the land is our mother. Her body is the mountains, her breath is the wind. If we lose her, we lose ourselves. For generations, the valley kept that promise, a world untouched by greed or war. But beyond the ridges, whispers of gold began to travel west, and the peace of the Wallowa Valley would not last forever. 8 summers passed, and the world around the Wallowa Valley began to change. In 1855, the United States government signed the Treaty of Walla Walla, recognizing the Nez Perce homeland as their own. It was a promise written on paper, but believed to be sealed by honor. For a moment, the people thought their valley would remain safe forever. Then came the gold seekers. Men with picks, rifles, and restless hunger flooded into Nez Perce land. The scent of metal in the rivers was stronger than any word of peace. Within 8 years, that promise was broken. A new treaty appeared, one the Nez Perce never agreed to. It carved away nearly all of their homeland, leaving them a narrow strip of soil that could not feed even a fraction of their people. The Nez Perce called it the Steel Treaty. The tribe divided. Some bands, weary of war, accepted the new borders and moved to the reservation in Idaho. Others refused to sign. Among them was a young leader, calm but unshakable, Chief Joseph of the Wallowa Band. When American officials urged him to surrender his land, he answered with words that still echo today. We do not sell the sun. We do not sell the water. We do not sell the land where our fathers rest. But the world of honor had already faded. Gold had spoken louder than any treaty. The lines on the map closed in around them, and the quiet valley that once knew only peace was about to hear the sound of soldiers' boots. By the spring of 1877, patience had run out. The government delivered its final order. Every non-treaty Nez Perce must leave the Wallowa Valley and report to the Idaho reservation within 30 days. 30 days to abandon their homes, their ancestors, their rivers, their horses. Chief Joseph tried to keep the peace. He gathered his people ready to obey the impossible and began to prepare for the long journey east. But in every camp, the anger was growing. For years, their families had been insulted, attacked, and murdered by settlers who were never punished. Among the younger men, rage burned hotter than reason. One night, they rode out seeking justice of their own. When the sun rose, 4 white men lay dead. What began as a small act of revenge would be taken as rebellion. The army seized the moment, eager for a reason to march. Within days, soldiers advanced into Nez Perce land. And so began the war that no one truly wanted. On June 14, 1877, in the steep hills of Whitebird Canyon, fewer than 100 Nez Perce warriors met 200 soldiers. They fought with calm precision, using every ridge and shadow to their advantage. When the smoke cleared, the army had been defeated. It was not a victory of conquest, but of survival. An elder later said, "From that day on, we knew there would be no more peace." The Nez Perce had won their first battle, but their greatest struggle was only beginning. The fires burned low in the camps of the Nez Perce. Smoke rose into the night sky, mixing with the weight of fear and silence. 3 chiefs sat together, their faces lit by the glow of embers. Chief Joseph, Looking Glass, White Bird. Men who carried not only the fate of their warriors but of their people. If we stay, our women and children will die. If we leave, there is still hope. Those words became their decision. They would not surrender to the reservation. They would not hand over the graves of their ancestors. They would walk away from the valley that had been their home since before memory. The Wallowa was more than land. It was the spirit of their fathers, the echo of their prayers, the rhythm of their horses' hooves. To leave it was to tear the heart from the body. But staying meant extinction. Their hope now rested on the open plains. Perhaps the Crow people in Montana would shelter them. And if not, there was still the long road north across the mountains to Canada. There, beyond the reach of the U.S. Army, lived Sitting Bull and his Lakota people, free for now. Nearly 800 souls gathered what they could carry. Warriors, mothers, elders, and children began to move. Behind them lay the sacred valley of Wallowa. Ahead waited a journey of 1,170 miles through mountains, rivers, and death itself. They were not marching to conquer. They were running to survive. The Nez Perce moved east away from their homeland and into the mountains. The trail climbed higher each day, winding through sharp ridges and frozen rivers. Snow fell even in summer, covering their tracks and blinding the eyes of their pursuers. It was a world of white silence where every breath burned and every step could mean death. Men carried the wounded on horseback. Women wrapped children in blankets made from the last of their buffalo hides. The elders walked until their legs gave out, then rose again when someone reached for their hand. Hunger gnawed, but no one was left behind. They moved together as one body, one heartbeat of survival. Behind them, General Oliver Howard's army followed, sure of an easy capture. But every time the soldiers reached a canyon or ridge, the Nez Perce were gone. They seemed to melt into the forest, vanish in the fog, and reappear miles ahead. One soldier wrote in disbelief, "They vanish into the mist ghosts of the mountains." Each mile across the Bitterroot became more than a march. It was a test of faith between man and nature, between flesh and spirit. The mountains did not welcome them, yet they offered a strange protection, hiding them from those who hunted them. When they finally reached the valleys beyond the peaks, the people believed freedom was near. But freedom, they would soon learn, was still far away. After weeks of moving through mountains and rivers, the Nez Perce finally stopped beside the Big Hole River. They believed they had outrun the soldiers. Tired and hungry, they built their lodges, lit small fires, and at last began to sleep. Before dawn on August 9, 1877, the sound of gunfire shattered the silence. The army had found them. Bullets tore through canvas and hide. Women and children ran toward the river, trying to escape the flames. Warriors grabbed their rifles and returned firefighting through smoke and panic. By the time the sun climbed above the ridges, more than 80 Nez Perce were dead. Most were not fighters. They were families struck down in their sleep. A survivor later said, "The river turned red and the mountain will never forget." The people buried their dead in haste, their tears mixing with the blood-soaked soil. The cry for freedom had become a song of mourning. They no longer dreamed of going home, only of surviving long enough to find safety. From this valley of ashes, they moved on once more, carrying the grief of the Big Hole with every step. The trail of grief did not break the spirit of the Nez Perce. Even after Big Hole, they moved with order and purpose, as if the soul of the tribe still beat in perfect rhythm. Every warrior knew his place. Every rider guarded not just his people, but the last shred of their dignity. As the soldiers closed in, the Nez Perce turned the wilderness into a weapon. They built decoy camps to lure the army into the wrong valleys. They vanished into canyons, reappeared miles away, then struck from behind. At Canyon Creek, they lit dummy lodges and set them ablaze, the smoke drawing soldiers toward an empty field, while families escaped through the ravines. The army grew frustrated, chasing shadows through endless terrain. General Howard, weary and astonished, finally confessed to his men, "With 200 such men in our army, we could defeat any nation." For the Nez Perce, these small victories were not triumphs of war. They were acts of endurance, of courage carved out of despair. Every mile they bought with cleverness and discipline, kept another child alive, another mother breathing, another elder on his feet. They fought not for conquest, but for the right to exist, and even as they bled, they still fought with honor. The mountains opened into a strange new world, a place unlike anything the Nez Perce had ever seen. Pools of boiling water hissed from the ground. Geysers shot into the sky like pillars of fire. The air smelled of sulfur and steam. This was the land that would one day be called Yellowstone. The people entered it not to conquer, but to survive. They followed the valleys and ridges, searching for a passage north. But the land itself seemed alive, rumbling beneath their feet, echoing the chaos of their flight. In these ghostly plains, they met travelers from another America, white tourists exploring the wilderness for adventure and wonder. Some of those travelers were taken hostage, others vanished, and soon newspapers shouted stories of savages in the steam. The headlines sold fear, but the truth was far simpler. The Nez Perce were not hunting anyone. They were running from death. Here, two Americas crossed paths and failed to understand each other. One came chasing beauty and discovery. The other was being hunted across its own homeland. Every step through this burning earth carried them closer to hope and further from home. They walked through mist and ash as if moving between worlds, their faces lit by firelight and grief. And though they were being erased from the map, their story refused to disappear. The flight of the Nez Perce through Yellowstone became legend, a journey through fire and steam toward the faint light of freedom. For 3 long months, the Nez Perce had crossed mountains, rivers, and endless plains. They had fought hunger, cold, and the relentless pursuit of soldiers. Now, at last, freedom was almost within reach. The Canadian border lay just 60 miles ahead. Beyond it waited the land of Sitting Bull, where the stars still shone on people who were free. But the journey had drained them. Horses staggered and fell on the frozen ground. Men marched barefoot through the snow, their moccasins worn to rags. Mothers carried children too weak to cry. The wind cut through their blankets like knives. There was no food left, no rest, and no strength to turn back. In the stillness of one bitter night, Chief Joseph looked to the sky and whispered a prayer. "If the spirits of our fathers still walk with us, let them carry us through this winter." Each mile north became an act of will, a defiance of exhaustion and despair. Every footprint in the snow was paid for with blood and tears. The people could almost feel freedom on the cold wind. They believed the next sunrise would bring them safety. But fate had one last cruelty to deliver. Snow began to fall over the plains of northern Montana as the Nez Perce made camp near the Bear Paw Mountains. They did not know that soldiers were already closing in from every side. General Nelson Miles had cut off their path to Canada. Freedom was only 40 miles away. The first shots came with the dawn. For 5 days they fought through blizzards and hunger, their rifles freezing in their hands. The wounded lay in the snow, wrapped in torn blankets, while mothers tried to shelter their children from the cold wind. The chiefs fell one by one. The people had no food left, no shelter, and no strength to continue. On October 5, 1877, Chief Joseph stepped forward to surrender. His voice was steady, but his heart was broken. "I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." Those words drifted over the frozen hills like a prayer for the dead. 40 miles to the north lay the border of Canada, and beyond it, the freedom they had sought for so long. But the snow had already buried their last hope. The war of the Nez Perce was over. Their journey, born of courage and faith, ended in silence beneath the winter sky. The war was over, but the suffering had only begun. 418 Nez Perce survivors were loaded onto trains, their wrists bound, their eyes hollow from hunger and grief. The wheels clattered through the night, carrying them far from the mountains, far from the rivers, far from home. Their destination was not freedom, but exile. First to the military prison at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, then to the swamps of Oklahoma. There the heat pressed down like a weight, and the air itself seemed to sicken them. Disease spread through the camps. Children died in their mothers' arms. Elders faded quietly in the shade of makeshift shelters. The government had promised that the people would one day return to their homeland in Idaho. But like so many promises before, it's exhaustion. Years passed, and the seasons turned, but the order never came. The Nez Perce waited in silence, their songs reduced to whispers. Chief Joseph wrote letter after letter to Washington begging for the right to go home. In one he said, "I cannot sleep, my heart is in the Wallowa." He would never see it again. In 1904, Joseph died far to the north in the Colville Reservation of Washington State. The doctor who examined him wrote simply, "He died of a broken heart," but his spirit did not die. It remained where the rivers meet, waiting for the people to return. More than a century has passed since the snow fell over Bear Paw. The guns are silent now, but the land still remembers. In 1986, the United States Congress officially recognized the Nez Perce or Ni-Mi-Pu National Historic Trail. It stretches for 1,170 miles across 4 states, tracing every step of the people's long flight from the Wallowa Valley to the plains of Montana. Along that trail lie the bones of their journey, campsites where families once slept beneath the stars, rivers that carried the blood of battle, valleys where prayers were whispered into the wind. Each place stands today as a silent chapter of a nation's sorrow and strength. Every year, descendants of the Nez Perce walk that trail again. They ride their horses through the same mountains, cross the same rivers, and speak the same words their ancestors once spoke. They do not walk it in defeat, but in remembrance. Each step is a vow that the story will not fade. They did not win the war, but they defeated oblivion. The Trail of Tears of the Nez Perce is not only a story of loss, but of endurance. It reminds us that freedom can be taken from the body, but never from the memory of a people. And so the trail lives on, carried in the footsteps of those who still remember, and in the heartbeat of the land that will never forget.